I watched them take down the sign. Sterling & Co., the family business that stole 10 years of my life. Workers pulled off each brass letter, one by one, and I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, just cold satisfaction as they put up the new sign. Sarah's legacy. Across the street stood my family. My father looked 10 years older. My mother couldn't meet my eyes. Jessica, my baby sister, who took everything from me, clutched debt notices in her shaking hands. They were watching their empire die. I took off my sunglasses, looked straight at my father and smiled. Then I walked into my building. My business. My legacy. But before I tell you how I got here, before I explain how I went from being the family doormat to the woman who destroyed and rebuilt a 50-year legacy, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about taking back your power. And comment below to tell me if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own self-respect. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a blueprint for anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I was 22 when I started working at Sterling & Co., fresh out of design school with a portfolio full of dreams and a heart full of naive hope. The jewellery store had been in my family for 2 generations, founded by my grandfather with nothing but skill and determination. My father had taken over when Grandpa died, and I had grown up in that store watching my grandfather's weathered hands transform raw metal and stone into pieces of art. I knew every corner of that workshop, every tool, every technique. While other kids played with dolls, I played with pliers and wire. While other teenagers obsessed over boys, I obsessed over the perfect setting for a Ceylon sapphire. I thought I was coming home when I walked through those doors as an employee. I thought I was stepping into my birthright. I was wrong. My younger sister Jessica was 17, then more interested in her Instagram followers than anything involving actual work. She'd spent her teenage years perfecting her selfie angles, while I spent mine perfecting my metalworking skills. But she was the baby, the one with the effortless charm and the bright smile that made our parents melt. I was the serious one, the worker bee, the one who didn't need constant attention and praise. Or so they thought. The arrangement seemed clear at first. I would work in the design studio and workshop, creating the pieces that kept Sterling & Co. relevant in an increasingly competitive market. My father would handle the business side, my mother would manage the front of house, and Jessica, when she finally decided to grow up, would find her place somewhere. Probably in marketing, I thought. She was good at posting pretty pictures after all. For 10 years, I poured everything into that business. I arrived before dawn to catch the perfect light for examining stones. I stayed until midnight perfecting a setting because anything less than perfect wasn't acceptable to me. I created designs that won awards that got featured in Vogue and Town & Country. The Sterling name, once respectable but regional, became synonymous with innovative luxury jewellery. Celebrities started requesting custom pieces. Our client list read like a who's who of American high society. And through it all, Jessica floated around the periphery, taking credit where she could, showing up for photo opportunities and contributing absolutely nothing of substance. She'd graduated from high school with mediocre grades and decided to study fashion, a choice that apparently meant attending classes sporadically, while spending most of her time at expensive parties and boutique openings. My parents funded everything. Her apartment in the city, her car, her lifestyle, all while paying me a salary that barely covered rent on my modest studio, despite the fact that my designs were generating millions. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself that I was doing this for love of the craft, that the recognition of my peers was enough, that family was about sacrifice. I told myself a lot of lies in those 10 years. The cracks started showing about a year before everything exploded. Jessica had graduated from her fashion program, a 4-year degree that had taken her 6 years to complete, and she started hanging around the store more often. Not to work, mind you, but to stage photo shoots and live streams. She'd bring her influencer friends and they'd use our pieces as props, treating priceless gems like accessories for their content. My mother thought it was wonderful exposure. I thought it was disrespectful, but I kept my mouth shut. Then came the comments. Little digs from my parents about how I needed to be more like Jessica, more personable with clients, more active on social media. Never mind that I was in the workshop creating the actual products we sold. Never mind that my hands bore the scars of 10 years of dedicated craftsmanship. Jessica could smile and take a selfie, and somehow that was more valuable than everything I did. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, but you know what they say about slowly boiling frogs. The 50th anniversary celebration was supposed to be a milestone, a moment to honour our family's legacy. Instead, it became the night my life imploded, and then, eventually, was reborn. My mother had insisted on making it extravagant, despite the fact that I knew our finances were shaky. I'd seen the books, sales were dropping, costs were climbing, and the second store we'd opened was drowning in debt. But image was everything to my parents, so we went ahead with a black tie gala at the most expensive venue in the city. I spent that entire day managing every detail. While Jessica was at a spa getting ready, I was directing caterers adjusting the display of our anniversary collection, which I had designed specifically for the event, and making sure every piece of jewellery on display was properly lit and secured. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated because I'd be working all night anyway. Jessica showed up in a dress that cost more than my monthly salary, spent 20 minutes taking photos, and then disappeared to make an entrance. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and champagne. 300 guests, all dressed in their finest, represented the cream of society. Clients, press, industry colleagues, all there to celebrate Sterling & Co. I should have been proud. Instead, I felt exhausted and unappreciated, but I plastered on a smile and kept working. Someone had to make sure everything ran smoothly. Dinner was served, speeches were made. My father talked about legacy and family values. My mother thanked everyone for their support. I waited for them to acknowledge my contributions, to recognise that every single piece in the anniversary collection had come from my hands and my mind. That acknowledgement never came. Then came the announcement that changed everything. My father took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone with that false heartiness he used for important occasions. My mother stood beside him beaming, and then Jessica joined them looking radiant and utterly clueless about what was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father announced, "as we celebrate 50 years of excellence, we also look to the future. And the future of Sterling & Co. is bright, thanks to my youngest daughter, Jessica, who has just completed her degree in fashion. Her fresh perspective and modern sensibilities are exactly what this company needs to thrive for the next 50 years. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Therefore, he continued, his smile wide and proud, it is my absolute pleasure to announce that Jessica Sterling will be taking over as Chief Executive Officer of Sterling & Co. effective immediately. The room erupted in applause. I stood frozen, a champagne flute trembling in my hand. CEO, Chief Executive Officer. The position I had assumed had worked toward, had earned through a decade of sweat and blood and tears. Given to my sister, who had never created a single piece, never brought in a single major client through her own merit, never spent a single night bent over a workbench until her back screamed. I must have moved toward the stage without realising it, because suddenly I was climbing the stairs, my mouth open to speak, to object, to demand an explanation. But my mother saw me coming. She stepped forward, still smiling for the crowd, and snatched the microphone away before I could reach it. Her hand closed around my wrist like a vice, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "Not now," she hissed in my ear, her smile never faltering. "Don't you dare embarrass this family. Get off the stage and go back to where you belong. The workshop. That's all you're good for." Something inside me snapped. 10 years of swallowed resentment, 10 years of being treated like hired help in my own family business, 10 years of watching my work go uncredited while Jessica got handed everything on a silver platter. All of it came roaring to the surface in one white-hot moment of clarity. I yanked the microphone from my mother's grip. The feedback screeched through the speakers, silencing the applause. 300 faces turned toward me, confused, curious, sensing drama. "Congratulations, Jessica," I said, my voice ringing clear and cold through the ballroom. "Congratulations on becoming the CEO of a company you've never truly worked for. I'm sure you'll do just fine, given that you've never actually examined a stone under a loupe, never spent hours perfecting a setting, never built a client relationship based on anything other than your Instagram followers." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My father's face turned purple. My mother looked like she wanted to physically remove me from the stage. Jessica just stood there, her mouth open in shock. But don't worry. I continued, feeling a wild freedom I'd never experienced before. "You'll have plenty of pretty jewellery to pose with." "Oh, wait, no you won't, because every single piece in our anniversary collection, every award-winning design that has put Sterling & Co. on the map for the past decade, all of it came from me. And I will be taking it all with me." I pulled my employee ID from around my neck and dropped it into the champagne flute I'd been holding. The liquid bubbled and fizzed. Then I turned to Jessica, who stood there in her expensive dress looking like a frightened deer, and with a swift flick of my wrist, I tossed the entire glass of champagne directly at her. The golden liquid splashed across her designer gown, soaking the silk and sending rivulets of wine and melted plastic dripping down the fabric. Jessica shrieked, stumbling backward in her heels. She lunged at me, hand raised to slap me, but I was faster. I caught her wrist, held it firmly, and then pushed her away. She lost her balance, those ridiculously high heels giving way, and fell backward onto the stage floor with a thud that echoed through the silent ballroom. The photographers went wild. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. I could already imagine the headlines: "Family drama erupts at Sterling & Co. Anniversary Gala. Heiress storms out." I didn't care. I walked off that stage with my head high, grabbed my coat from the check room and left the building. Behind me, I could hear my mother trying to smooth things over, hear my father's angry shouts, hear Jessica's continued wailing. I didn't look back. I went home to my tiny studio apartment, poured myself a large glass of wine and pulled out my laptop. Then I started documenting everything. Every design I'd created, every patent I'd filed under my own name, not the company's, because I'd been smart enough to protect my intellectual property from the very beginning. Every client relationship I'd built personally, every award I'd won. By dawn, I had a comprehensive portfolio of evidence proving that I, not Sterling & Co., owned the rights to every major design that had made the company relevant in the past decade. The next morning, I returned to the store to collect my personal belongings from the workshop. I wasn't expecting my father to be there, but, of course, he was blocking the entrance to the back rooms, like a bouncer at an exclusive club. "You traitful little bitch!" He snarled, his face still red with rage. "After everything we've given you, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. I looked at him calmly, no longer the dutiful daughter desperate for his approval. That woman had died on the stage last night. "Everything you've given me," I repeated, my voice deadly quiet. "You mean the privilege of working 90-hour weeks for poverty wages while my sister partied her way through a 6-year bachelor's degree? You mean the honour of creating award-winning designs that you took credit for? You mean the joy of watching you hand my birthright to someone who can't tell a cubic zirconia from a diamond? You walk out that door and you're finished," he threatened, stepping closer. "I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will call every designer, every jeweller, every supplier we know and tell them you're unstable, unprofessional, impossible to work with. You will starve." I pulled a folder from my bag, thick with documents, and held it up. "You seem to have forgotten something, Dad," I said, almost enjoying the confusion on his face. "For the past 10 years, every major design I've created, I've filed the patents and copyrights under my own name. Every award-winning piece, every innovative technique, every signature element that makes Sterling & Co. special, All of it legally belongs to me, not to the company. I watched the colour drain from his face as the implication sank in. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wavered. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of one of our current window displays featuring my latest collection. That's my design. So is that one. And that one. In fact, I count at least 60 pieces currently on display or in inventory that I own the intellectual property rights to. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to collect my tools and my personal items. And then I'm going to contact my lawyer about every piece of my work that Sterling & Co. is currently profiting from without my permission. I pushed past him and walked into the workshop that had been my sanctuary for a decade. Every tool I'd purchased myself went into boxes. Every sketch, every mould, every prototype. I worked methodically, ignoring my father's continued threats from the doorway. By noon, I had stripped that workshop of anything that bore my mark. As I carried the last box out, I paused next to him. Oh, and Dad, you might want to tell Jessica to be very careful with that social media presence of hers. Defamation lawsuits are expensive. I had barely gotten home when my phone exploded with notifications. Jessica had gone on the offensive, posting a long, tearful video on Instagram about her jealous, bitter sister who couldn't handle success, and calling on her followers to boycott anything I might create in the future. The comments were vicious, filled with people who knew nothing about the situation except what Jessica had told them, all calling me a traitor, a horrible sister, an ungrateful daughter. I turned off my phone and called Alexander Chen, a lawyer I'd met at one of the industry events I'd attended. He was known for being ruthless, for taking on cases that others considered unwinnable, and for having a particular interest in intellectual property law. When I explained my situation, I could hear the smile in his voice. You've been very smart, he said after reviewing the documents I sent over. Very smart indeed. This is going to be fun. 3 days later, Sterling & Company received a cease and desist letter requiring them to immediately remove from display sale and promotional materials any and all designs for which I held intellectual property rights. The list was extensive. The deadline was immediate. But Alexander and I went one step further. We contacted every major client who had purchased one of my pieces and informed them of the situation, offering them authentication certificates and appraisals at no cost. We wanted them to know that their pieces had come from me, not from Sterling & Co. as an entity. The response was overwhelming. Clients were furious at being misled. Some demanded refunds. Others wanted to work with me directly for future pieces. The real masterpiece came a week later. Jessica had scheduled a major live stream event, planning to showcase the new fall collection and take orders. We tipped off the authorities about the intellectual property violations. Just as Jessica went live with thousands of viewers, watching a team of lawyers and police officers walked into the store with a court order. They began systematically removing pieces from the displays, tagging them as evidence of copyright infringement. Jessica's face on that live stream was priceless. She tried to stay composed, tried to explain it away as a misunderstanding, but her hands were shaking. Her voice was high and panicked. The chat exploded with confusion and speculation. By the time the stream ended abruptly, the damage was done. The video went viral, but not in the way my family had hoped. I didn't gloat on social media. I didn't respond to Jessica's increasingly unhinged posts. I just worked. I rented a small studio space in a restored brownstone, nothing fancy but mine. I installed my equipment, organised my tools, and put out a quiet message to my former clients. I was available for custom commissions by appointment only. The response was immediate. Mrs. Pemberton, who I'd worked with for 5 years on various pieces, was my first client. Then came the Richardsons, the Ashfords, the Chen Wallaces, all people who had valued my work, who had seen through the Sterling & Co. branding to recognise the artists behind the pieces. Within a month, I had a 6-month waiting list. Within 3 months, I was turning people away. I operated in near silence, letting my work speak for itself. No social media presence, no advertising, no promotional events. Just exceptional craftsmanship and word of mouth among people who could afford the best and refused to settle for less. Meanwhile, Sterling & Company was imploding. Without my designs to showcase, without the innovative pieces that had distinguished them from every other jewelry store, they were just another retailer selling generic luxury goods. Jessica tried to commission new designers, but she had no eye for quality, no understanding of what made a piece special. The designs she approved were derivative, uninspired, sometimes laughably bad. Sales plummeted. The industry took notice. But I didn't plan for what happened next. That was pure karmic justice. Mrs. Henrietta Vane was old money, the kind of wealth that had been compounding for 6 generations. She owned a collection of jewelry that belonged in museums, including a set of emeralds that had belonged to a Russian duchess. The pieces were priceless, irreplaceable, and she trusted very few people to handle them. I had serviced those pieces twice before treating them with the reverence they deserved. After I left Sterling & Co., Mrs. Vane had apparently decided to give Jessica a chance. Maybe she felt sorry for her. Maybe she didn't know the full story. Whatever the reason, she brought in the emerald, set for cleaning and maintenance, a routine service that I had performed countless times without incident. I didn't know any of this was happening. I was busy in my studio working on a commission for a client in Boston when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Vane's personal assistant, and her voice was shaking with rage. I didn't get all the details until the lawsuit was filed and discovery began. But here's what I eventually learned. Jessica, in her infinite wisdom and desperation to prove herself, had decided to personally oversee the maintenance of Mrs. Vane's emeralds. She wanted to tell people that Mrs. Vane trusted her. But Jessica had never actually learned proper gem care. She'd assigned a newly hired, barely trained employee to do the actual work, and they'd used the wrong cleaning solution. Emeralds are delicate. They're often treated with oils to enhance their appearance, and certain chemicals can damage them catastrophically. The solution Jessica's employee used stripped the oils, caused microfractures, and actually changed the colour of several stones. $500,000 worth of irreplaceable gems damaged beyond repair. But it got worse, so much worse. Instead of immediately confessing and working to make it right, Jessica panicked. She had the stones photographed, then sourced synthetic replacements of similar size and shape. She had them set in the original settings and returned them to Mrs. Vane, hoping the elderly woman wouldn't notice the difference. She nearly got away with it. Nearly. 3 months later, there was a charity gala, one of those glittering affairs where old money and new money mingled and competed to see who could wear the most impressive jewels. Mrs. Vane attended, wearing her emerald set. I was there too, having been invited by a client who wanted to introduce me to some potential customers. I wasn't planning to stay long, just make an appearance and leave. Then I saw Mrs. Vane across the room, and something was wrong. The emeralds looked off. The colour was too uniform, too perfect. Natural emeralds have inclusions, variations, character. These looked like textbook illustrations of emeralds artificially flawless. I tried to ignore it. It wasn't my business anymore. But Mrs. Vane noticed me and waved me over, delighted to see me. "Sarah, darling," she said, gesturing to her necklace. "You always appreciated these pieces. Don't they look wonderful?" That sweet Jessica at Sterling assured me they'd never looked better after their cleaning. I looked at the stones more closely. Under the ballroom lights, I could see the telltale signs. Too much fire, wrong, refractive index, slight colour variations that natural stones would never have. My stomach dropped. "Mrs. Vane," I said carefully, "may I ask when you had these serviced?" She told me. 3 months ago, right after I'd left. I had a choice to make. I could keep quiet, mind my own business, avoid the drama. Or I could tell this woman the truth about what had been done to her family heirlooms. Mrs. Vane," I said, gently, drawing her to a quieter corner. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not react immediately. Those emeralds you're wearing are not your emeralds. They're synthetic." Her face went white. Her hand flew to her necklace. "That's impossible," she whispered, as Jessica assured me. "I can prove it," I said. "There's a gemologist here tonight, Dr. Schwartz. He has portable testing equipment in his car because he's obsessive like that. With your permission, we can test them right now." 20 minutes later, in a quiet room away from the party, Dr. Schwartz confirmed what I'd suspected. Every single stone in Mrs. Vane's set was synthetic. High-quality synthetics, expensive synthetics, but synthetic nonetheless. Her priceless heirlooms were gone, replaced with lab-created stones worth perhaps $10,000 total. Mrs. Vane's reaction was terrifying in its quiet intensity. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She simply stood up, walked back into the ballroom, found Jessica, who was holding court with a group of admirers, and slapped her across the face with enough force to echo off the walls. The room went silent. Every eye turned to watch as Mrs. Vane, all 5 feet 2 inches of 80-year-old fury, denounced Jessica and Sterling & Co. as frauds and thieves. She announced that she would be filing both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit, and that she would personally make sure everyone in this room and beyond knew exactly what kind of business Sterling & Co. really was. Jessica tried to deny it, tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, but too many people had heard Mrs. Vane's accusation. Dr. Schwartz stepped forward to confirm his findings. The damage was instantaneous and total. Every influential person in that room made a mental note never trust Sterling & Company again. The lawsuit, when it was filed, was devastating. Mrs. Vane didn't just sue for the value of the destroyed emeralds. She sued for fraud, for breach of trust, for emotional distress, for everything her very expensive lawyers could think of. The amount demanded was astronomical enough to bankrupt Sterling & Company several times over. But that wasn't even the worst part. The criminal investigation revealed that Jessica had knowingly substituted the stones and returned them, which meant fraud charges. Real charges with potential jail time. My father, as the majority owner and president, was also implicated in the cover-up, even though I don't think he knew about it until it was too late. The company's insurance wouldn't cover fraud. Their assets were seized. The store was forced to close. Everything went up for auction to pay the settlement. I didn't have to do anything. I just watched as the empire my grandfather had built, that my father had maintained, that I had elevated, crumbled under the weight of Jessica's incompetence and dishonesty. Then came the day I'd been waiting for, though I hadn't known I was waiting for it. It was a Sunday morning early when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find my entire family standing there. My father looked like he'd aged 20 years. My mother's designer clothes hung on her frame, clearly not replaced in months. Jessica, my baby sister, looked hollow, her Instagram-perfect facade cracked and crumbling. They didn't say anything at first. Then, my father, the man who had threatened to destroy me, the man who had dismissed 10 years of my dedication, did something I'd never seen him do in my entire life. He got down on his knees. "Sarah," he said, his voice breaking, "please, we need your help." My mother joined him, kneeling on my doorstep. Then, Jessica, tears streaming down her face, did the same. "We're going to lose everything," my mother whispered. "The house, the business, everything your grandfather built. The settlement is due in 30 days and we can't pay it. We're begging you, please, if you withdraw your intellectual property claims and help us settle with Mrs. Vane, we might be able to save something." I looked at them, these 3 people who were supposed to love me, who had treated me like a servant in my own family for a decade. Part of me, a small part that still remembered being a little girl who just wanted her parents' approval, wanted to help them, wanted to save them because they were family. But I'd learnt something important in the past 6 months. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect, trust, and mutual support. And these people had shown me repeatedly that they had none of those things to offer. "Do you remember," I said quietly, "when you gave everything to Jessica? When you handed her a position she didn't earn, an opportunity she didn't deserve, and expected me to just accept it? Do you remember when you told me my place was in the workshop, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps you threw me?" My father opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I spent 10 years building your business," I continued. 10 years sacrificing my own advancement, my own opportunities, because I believed in family loyalty. I believed that my work would be recognised eventually, that dedication would be rewarded. I was wrong. "We're sorry," Jessica sobbed. "We're so sorry, Sarah. Please, we're family. Family is supposed to forgive each other." I crouched down so I was eye level with her. "You're right," I said. Family is supposed to forgive, but family is also supposed to value each other, support each other, build each other up. You didn't do any of those things. You used me, dismissed me, and then you tried to destroy me when I finally stood up for myself. That's not family. That's exploitation. I stood up and stepped back from my doorway. The answer is no, I said. I will not help you. I will not withdraw my claims. And I will not save you from the consequences of your own actions. You taught me that lesson very well. Actions have consequences. My mother started to argue, started to talk about family bonds and Christian forgiveness, and all the guilt trip classics, but I simply closed the door. I listened to them knock for another 10 minutes before they finally left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandfather, about the business he'd built with his own hands, about the legacy that was about to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. And I realised something. That legacy wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. It had always been mine. I was the one who had elevated it, modernised it, made it into something special. Not my father with his business degree, not Jessica with her selfies, me. The next morning, I called Alexander. I want to buy sterling and Kodos, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Everything the store, the name, the assets, everything, I confirmed. At the auction. But I want to do it anonymously through a shell company. I don't want them to know it's me until it's done. He laughed, genuinely delighted. You're diabolical. I love it. The auction was held on a grey Wednesday morning at the county courthouse. My father, mother, and Jessica sat in the front row, watching as everything they owned was sold off piece by piece. The workshop equipment went first. Then the furniture, the displays, the inventory. Small lots picked over by bargain hunters and competitors looking for deals. Then came the big items. The building itself, the Sterling and Company name and trademark. The client list worth hundreds of thousands on its own. The remaining inventory of pieces not covered by my intellectual property claims. I sat in the back of the room, wearing sunglasses and a hat, watching through my lawyer as he bid on each major lot. Every time someone else bid, he went higher. Every time my father's face fell a little more, Alexander raised his paddle. When it was over, my shell company owned everything. The building, the name, the history, all of it. For a fraction of what it had been worth at its peak, but more than enough to satisfy Mrs. Vane's settlement. The papers were signed, the transfer was immediate, and then Alexander did exactly what I'd asked him to do. He walked up to my father and handed him a document. The new owner of Sterling and Coty wanted me to give you this, he said. It's a notice of termination for the lease on your home. The house belongs to the business assets and the new owner wants possession in 30 days. I watched my father's face as he read the document, watched the moment when he saw the signature at the bottom. Sarah Sterling. His head whipped around, searching the courtroom. Our eyes met across the room. I took off my sunglasses and let him see the satisfaction in my expression. My mother gasped. Jessica just stared, uncomprehending. I stood up, walked down the aisle, and stopped in front of them. Consider this a lesson in valuing your assets, I said calmly. 10 years ago, I was your most valuable asset, and you treated me like I was worthless. Now, I own everything you've ever had, and you have nothing. That's not revenge. That's just mathematics. I turned to Alexander. I want the Sterling and Cody name officially changed within the week. New sign, new branding, everything. What name would you like? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah's Legacy. I said loud enough for my family to hear, because that's what it always should have been. That was 6 months ago. Today, as I walked into my store, my workshop, my legacy, I felt the weight of those 10 years finally lift from my shoulders. The interior had been completely renovated. Clean lines, modern displays, a workshop visible from the showroom floor, so clients could watch their pieces being created. This wasn't my grandfather's store anymore, and it wasn't my father's failed empire. It was mine, built on skill and determination, and the refusal to accept less than I deserved. My first employee arrived, a talented young designer I'd been mentoring. She reminded me of myself at that age, full of passion and hope. But unlike my experience, I would make sure she was valued, credited, and compensated fairly. "Morning, boss," she said, grinning. Ready to show the world what Sarah's legacy is all about. I smiled back, genuine and free. Let's get to work. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a position where the people who were supposed to support you tried to hold you back? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Have you ever had to burn everything down to build something better? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and you never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. And if this story inspired you, if it reminded you that you don't have to accept being undervalued, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about taking back your power and refusing to be anyone's doormat. Because the truth is, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. And sometimes the family you deserve is the one you build yourself, not the one you were born into. Remember, your worth isn't determined by the people who can't see it. It's determined by you and what you refuse to settle for. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you should be grateful for the scraps from their table when you're the one who cooked the whole meal. Now go out there and build your own legacy.